Now I'd like to introduce our third speaker, Dr. Jochen Schweitzer. Jochen lectures in strategy, innovation and entrepreneurship here at UTS, and he heads up the MBA Entrepreneurship program, which is a new program that Jochen will tell you about, no doubt. He's research stream leader for strategy and creativity within the UTS Center for Management and Organizational Studies, and founded the multidisciplinary innovation hub, ULab. Jochen has also coached in design thinking, been a management consultant, and a cultural programs coordinator. Please welcome Jochen Schweitzer.
Thank you. Thanks. All right. Good evening, everyone. My big pleasure to be here tonight, I must say. I want to talk to the topic of enabling entrepreneurship. And what I want to tell you is, to some extent, my personal journey in this endeavor, because I do think it in some way reflects the institutional journey in this as well. But let's talk about the elephant in the room. Elon Musk, we heard a quote of him before. He says, "I hire people in spite of having an MBA, not because of one." I'm not sure if you heard this quote before, but Elon Musk, and you know Elon Musk is one of our great visionaries, I think, at the time. What does he really mean when he says that? I think he doesn't necessarily mean that he doesn't value people having an MBA. He was just saying that people with an MBA might not have the right skill set that is needed for the kind of work that he wants to do. So if we look at a time scale and we look at the maturity of a business or the maturity of a product or service, then over time, obviously, over maturity or the maturity grows as the business proceeds or as the product and service development proceeds. At the same time, the uncertainty that the business is facing is decreasing because you're growing mature, you know more, you sort of know your competition, you know who else is playing, and uncertainty decreases. What we find is that in that space, further down that pipeline, where uncertainty is low and maturity is great, we have something that we could call corporate management. People who run businesses, established businesses, mature proposals. In that other space, on the left-hand side here, we have something else happening. And let's call that entrepreneurial management. And that is where you're operating and managing in times of high uncertainty and low maturity of products and services. And I do think that probably most of the MBA programs that we know around the country, around the world, are focusing on corporate management. They're not necessarily focusing, with a few notable exceptions, on how to run in a startup sort of economy. So that's, I think, why entrepreneurial management requires a slightly different skill set and a slightly different mindset. And that's what I want to talk about tonight, and that's what I want to also tell you how the journey that I myself or the university as a whole sort of undertook to get to this point. Strengthening this point too, Scott Cook is the founder and CEO of Intuit company. He says, when MBAs come to us, we have to fundamentally retrain them. Nothing they learned will help them succeed at innovation. So that's sort of in line with the quote from Elon Musk. Now, how does it work out for me? How was my experience in this? I've been teaching in the UTS Business School since 2008 as a faculty, and I was teaching strategy classes. Usually when you teach strategy classes, you use Harvard Business case studies. Harvard Business case studies are often about 5 to 10 years old. So in 2008, I do teach a case study that's probably from 2005, maybe 1999, older than that even. The question really is, how much can you learn from that in an environment that's changing quickly? And my realization was that not much. Not much, and even my students didn't enjoy that too much. So focusing on the case method in that case didn't really work for me, and at the same time I thought the skills required to solve a case were mostly analytical skills. And my business school students were quite good at that, crunching that Excel sheet, coming up with that return of investment, but did they actually find out something that was novel and interesting? No. Did they find the solution? Yes, sometimes. Could we learn from that? Not too much. Learning from the past is lacking relevance. And strategically seen as or strategy as an area is actually not learning much from the past. You can't predict past success into the future. It's just not working. So I needed something else. And I started to look around for opportunities for at least real cases that had more relevance. And I started to work with companies. This is an example of an NGO, a skateboarding school in Afghanistan that I knew through my friend Oliver Perkovic. who was looking for ways to broaden their base of getting income into their NGO. They needed more sources of funding. In Afghanistan at the time, it was heavily funded, or it was at least funded by the Olympic Committee, some sort of government money. But he knew that that would run out as the interest in Afghanistan would decrease over time, so he needed to find new sources. And we were on a cycling trip around New Zealand, and I said, well, I could offer you 80 MBA students to sort of crunch their heads and minds a little bit about your problems. We came up with a couple of problems, and for one semester, my students would work on those challenges and found that completely engaging and absolutely great. They would still sort of rave about that experience, which is fantastic. Looking at the solutions that they provided, I realized that, well, they were great and they were really engaged, but in fact, did they actually come up with novel solutions here? No, they didn't. They were mostly looking at best practice in other industries or in the same industry and would apply that to the context. So what was still missing was a way for them to creatively engage with the problem and come up with something that hadn't been there before. So I continued my journey, so we're in 2010 now, and came across Bill Morgridge, and he said, there's nothing made by humans beings that does not involve a design decision somewhere. And we heard that earlier about the act of creating, us all being entrepreneurs and creative in some way. This led me to down the road of design thinking as a method of creative problem solving that we could use in business education. So I went on a study tour to the land of Silicon Valley and engaged with a couple of organizations and people here. This is David Kelly, the founder of IDEO, a consulting company in this space, and also a professor at Stanford University. So looking at what was happening at Stanford, at the D School at the time, the Stanford Entrepreneurship Program and the entrepreneurial ecosystem around the Silicon Valley was really impressive at the time. So 2010, 2011. I had the chance to speak to some of those entrepreneurs on Google Avenue here in Mountain View, and it was a time where the co-working spaces were popping up and the rise of the co-working space happened. Tech startup culture and economy was just really bubbling for quite a while actually in Silicon Valley. The big question was, can it be copied? Can we have something like this in Australia? And can we copy the success stories there? Coming back to Australia, a couple of colleagues and myself started an initiative. We wanted to try out design thinking as a method to engage with our students, multidisciplinary student teams, figuring out if we can tackle big challenges using design. And at that point of time, it wasn't necessarily very entrepreneurial. We were just after innovation, really, after something new. So we got a space just around the corner. It doesn't exist anymore. It's been redeveloped. and a little bit of seed funding, a little bit of funds from the university for one semester to pilot a couple of initiatives, mostly focusing on design thinking and creative problem solving with multidisciplinary student teams. And from that grew what we then called the U-Lab, which was an initiative spanning across the university and engaging with students from different faculties. We developed a learning program, a curriculum, and adopting design thinking as a way of coming up with novel ideas and proposals and slowly building in sort of business thinking, but having the creation part happening first and then adding on business thinking, because I do think if you have a great idea, you can always find a business model to make it work. We also realized that we have to watch what we're doing here. We have to really understand deeply what the mechanisms are that make this kind of work. So we started doing some research around the educational approach that we took in this initiative. So we started to research, basically switch the camera on and analyze what sort of dynamics, what sort of conversations were people having that are working with that in that space. By 2012, I had an opportunity to visit the other D school, the one at Potsdam University in Germany, and I spent half a year teaching in that program. The Hasso-Plattner Institute, and Hasso-Plattner himself is the one who funded the D school in Stanford with a really big endowment of $40 million, but he also runs a big place in Potsdam in Germany that is mostly focusing on engineering and IT development, but also has a sister organization to the D school at Stanford. And they are taught for half a year, and also had the opportunity to sort of understand how they run their venture programs in Berlin, also immersing myself a little bit into that Berlin startup scene. 2013, back in Australia again, bringing more of that entrepreneurial, challenge-based learning into the ULAB program, we started to collaborate with organizations that would propose a challenge that the students then could work on. And we learned a lot about mixing teams, bringing diversity into that team, and making collaboration between business people, managers, designers, engineers, and clients work. And it started to become a little bit more entrepreneurial in the sense that we asked students not just to come up with a great solution to a very difficult problem, but also to build an entrepreneurial, a business idea around that. And that really sort of then changed the whole game in terms of making the programs more entrepreneurial than before, which meant we needed feedback. We needed to open our doors and let some people in to get the feedback that we needed to validate the ideas that were being proposed. So really emphasizing the importance of getting the entrepreneurial community in the room with you to have such things like demo days where they can get feedback. And ideally, something can grow from that. So creating opportunities to share and connect, integrate and connect with the entrepreneurship and innovation community that surrounds you. In 2015, I went back into the business school and developed the undergrad program in innovation and entrepreneurship, basically adopting the approaches that we've tested and piloted in the ULAB. And in 2016, we're launching the MBA in entrepreneurship. Ta-da, here we are, 2016. This program started in March this year, and to some extent it's a culmination of all these little experiences that I had personally or that the university had working in this space. And of course there's lots of other things going on. I'm going to talk about those in a minute. But the MBA in entrepreneurship is a program that is focusing on developing key knowledge, entrepreneurial mindset, self-confidence, and the networks that one needs to come up with a proposal or to develop a business that they could sort of continue from there on. So, who is this for? Who do I want to attract with that? Well, obviously those people who are not necessarily wanting to be in a corporate role in Australia. I'm looking for technical founders. I'm looking for people with a disciplinary background in engineering, in IT, in fashion, in design, in architecture, in any field really, medical science. This is for people who want to brush up on their business skills and learn how to articulate a proposal. But I'm also looking for maybe commercial founders, people who might already have a bit of a business background, but also want to not necessarily work in large corporate organizations, but be part of that startup economy. And what we increasingly see is that big, large corporate organizations in Australia are very interested too in this kind of skill set. So there is someone like the intrapreneur, the person that is the change maker, the innovator within large organizations, that is also often thinking, I'm lacking a certain skill set to do what I'm supposed to do well. So these are the three target audience, basically, for this program. So how does it work? How does the MBA in entrepreneurship work as a program? I'll give you a quick run through the curriculum, the 4-credit program, so you get an idea of how we structured that degree. It's structured into 3 separate graduate certificates, which makes it really flexible. That means that as a student, you can come in and come out and do only just a part of it, but if you've done them all, you also get an MBA for it. This is practical because we realize that students in this cohort need that flexibility, because they might just do one certificate, work on their startup for half a year or a semester, and then come back to get more. So this is a way for them to engage flexibly with the curriculum. In the first certificate, the one that we call the Graduate Certificate in Commercialization, students undertake 4 little subjects, with like 3 credit point units in accounting, finance, statistics, and marketing sales. We consider these a base layer of business skills, which are important for anyone who hasn't got a business background already. So we work with students to get them that fundamental background in those subjects. And then through opportunity commercialization, they learn how to assess and how to articulate an opportunity. In the Graduate Certificate for Entrepreneurship, they have 3 units. A big one, which is a consulting-based, challenge-based subject, where we plug them into existing startups and let groups of 5-4 students work with that startup or that company to work on a particular innovation or entrepreneurial challenge. Leadership teams and scalability is about understanding how you grow and scale an organization. How do you go from being the founder and employing number two? Who is number two going to be? What kind of skill set does number two need? And number 3 and 4 and 6 and 7. Corporate structures and intellectual property is a legal subject, understanding basic business law as it applies to the startup sector. In the third certificate, there's 2 big subjects in there, and basically this runs like an accelerator program. Over the semester, over the summer term, students would engage deeply in 2 subjects. One focusing on global entrepreneurship in the sense of really getting to the edge of knowledge in their particular discipline, to have deep knowledge in that space, and venture planning and pitching, helping them to articulate that business proposal as an accelerator program over those 10, 11 weeks. So that's the program, and the whole program is embedded in all the other activities that are going on at the university at the same time. We heard about a few already. And just to mention that, there's about 45 different innovation entrepreneurship subjects across all UTS faculties, which is fantastic. We have non-award programs like the Hatchery that was mentioned before, the Hatchery Plus, which is an incubation program, seminar series, Shopfront, the Build program, career services. All these are contributing to that ecosystem that we have created at UTS. UTS Commercial, Access UTS, the consulting arm of UTS. Within the business schools, we run non-awards program. We have master classes, startup stories, internship programs, business plan competitions, startup week activities, and so on. And then, of course, our Bachelor of Creative Intelligence and Innovation, wonderful program in the undergrad sector, through which students come up and probably and hopefully interested also in what we offer in the postgraduate area. And then, of course, all the other student activities, student-led activities, the entrepreneurial societies, and so on. And that's just what's happening around UTS. And then add to that everything else that's happening in Sydney. So, quickly, who does this? We have a great gender split. We have 13 females and 17 males in the program. The average age is about 34. That makes my cohort relatively old, which is great, because it means they have about 13.5 years of professional experience. It's more comparable to an executive MBA kind of cohort than to a traditional MBA cohort. Most of my students are out from Australia, but many of them are born in these countries on the slide here. Industry backgrounds. 6 coming out of IT engineering, 1 journalist, 4 out of marketing, real estate, retail, sport, construction, government, health, food. So we have a great mix of industry background, which helps us to create that environment where we want people to come together with business backgrounds and non-business backgrounds. So in a sense, we're trying to orchestrate that as well, of course, to get this perfect mix. When I ask my students if they already consider themselves being entrepreneurs, then 20 of them say yes, because they are already either involved in a startup or sort of actively thinking and acting upon it. So why would you do this? You do this degree because it gets you thinking like an entrepreneur and gets your ideas ready for a sort of market within those 12 months of study. Your entry with degrees, any bachelor degree gets you to join the program. If you don't have an undergrad degree, you have the opportunity to do these graduate certificates with significant business experience or sort of professional experience. No experience assumed. Knowledge must have at least the start of an entrepreneurial idea. So as people come into the program, the condition to come into the program is to have an idea, something to start with. And for some of them, that's quite concrete, and for others, it's quite vague. 1 year full-time, and electives are not existing because it's a full program. Do I have time to talk about this? Quickly. Because I wanted to wrap this up with some of the findings coming out of these studies that we've done on the entrepreneurship cohort, not this one, but the ones that I talked about earlier. And it's a collection of 11 mindsets that I would say are entrepreneurial or innovation mindsets. And just quickly, I want to run you through them because I think they are the ones, they are the behaviors, attitudes, and cognition that I would like to encourage in the students taking this program. We've heard a few of them earlier. One of them is about being empathetic towards people's needs and contexts. It's all about really being able to put yourself into the shoes of the customer, but not just the customer, also the other stakeholders, your colleagues and your employees. Empathy is something that I think entrepreneurs should know. being collaboratively geared and embracing diversity, all about being able to work in diverse teams, the engineers, software people, the business person, the venture capitalist in the back of that. So you have to think about the we more so than about the I. Being inquisitive and open to new perspectives and learning. We heard about failing forward, learning a lot from your experiences. There's a curiosity that is needed to be an entrepreneur, and you should value that. Being mindful of process and thinking modes. As you go through an innovation process, you have to know where you are on that journey, to know which kind of tool, which kind of skill to use at a time. So you have to be mindful and be aware of what's happening at the time. Experimental intelligence, we heard about, prototyping, testing your ideas early on. So experiential intelligence means that you know how to do that. Taking action deliberately and overt. Rather doing than overthinking is something I think that's a mindset that entrepreneurs and innovators show. Being creative, but being consciously creative, knowing when and how to use creative techniques in the process. But sometimes you don't need to be creative, you just have to get things done. But in other times, you really have to be using that creativity muscle. Very importantly in this context, being accepting of uncertainty and open to risk. And I think we have some time to discuss this later as well. Modeling behavior in the sense that you are the business, you are not the business model, you are the model for the people around you on that journey. So you want to be modeling this behavior and leading this process. Second last, the desire and determination to make a difference is what we found in those students and in those people that we interviewed being an underlying sort of mindset. And finally, the ability to critically question what you're doing, what others are doing, and not being happy with just the normal solutions. Going beyond that. So there you have it. 11 mindsets. The MBA is built around those different mindsets, which are in a way behaviors, cognition, and attitudes towards this process. It's a journey, and I think I gave you some idea of how the journey looked for me in the context of this program. Thank you very much.